قال الله تبارك وتعالى في القرآن المجيد بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا أنزلناه القرآن عربيا لعلكم تعقلون نحن نقص عليك أحسن القصص بما أوحينا إليك هذا القرآن وإن كنت من قبله لمن الغافلين. وقال ابن عطاء لم يسمع سورة يوسف محزون إلا استراح منها. Alhamdulillah, today we will be covering Surah Yusuf, and this surah is a very special surah in the Quran because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself deems this to be ahsan al-qasas, the best of stories. And you know how when we tell our kids, or we explain to someone, you want to hear one of my favorite stories or one of my best stories, and it's usually like how I came to America, how I got here. Or sometimes it's or how back home so much crazy things would happen, like I was driving a motorcycle when I was 5 years old, and all these beautiful or these favorite stories this individual has, and he says this is my favorite story. Now imagine Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying this is the best story. Imagine the value of the story, the lessons from the story, the weight of the story, that Allah himself is saying this is the best story. And this story starts off with it's this young boy, a young boy by the name of Yusuf. Now, before we get into the story, there's many angles you can go by the story. You can go by sequence, to go by from the beginning, what happened next, what happened after, or you can go by the lessons you get from the story in each stage of his life. But the way that I want to cover is I want to cover his hardships, because the reason why the story was revealed in the first place was to give comfort to Rasulullah ﷺ. That is the main reason why Allah revealed the story. Because at the time where this surah was revealed, it was the time the Prophet was going through the hardest point of his life, the lowest point of his life. This was that year when his wife Khadija passed away, when his uncle Abu Talib passed away, and when he went to Ta'if and he was pelted and he was shunned and he was bleeding, sitting under that tree. That was the lowest point of the Prophet. And how do we know that? Because Aisha asked the Prophet himself, O Prophet of Allah, what was the hardest day of your life? Now people may think it may be Badr, Uhud, or it may be the time where close friends passed away. He said, no, it was that moment under that tree after Ta'if, because the weight of the death of my wife was on my shoulders, the weight of the death of my uncle was on my shoulders, and the weight of these people rejecting me was on my shoulders. This was the hardest day that I could have gone through. And after this day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed a surah to comfort the Prophet ﷺ, to comfort him, to bring some type of istiraha. Ibn Atta says that a person who hears the surah, it is not a person who is sad, it is impossible for him not to feel some type of comfort if he actually looks into the surah properly. So the surah brings comfort in one's lives when he's going through hardships. And the Prophet received it. And if we think about it in a logical sense, if this surah was revealed to give a boost of iman to the Prophet, to give him a boost of strength, to give him a boost of courage, imagine what it would do to normal people like us. Imagine the power it can have on normal people like us if we actually read it wholeheartedly. So this story has 5 hardships that Yusuf a.s. goes through, and it has, following these 5 hardships, it has 5 victories that he receives after these hardships. Now the first hardship is the betrayal of his own blood brothers. His own brothers who got jealous of him. And Mufassirun, they depict this scene of how, in the Quran it doesn't really explain how it happened. It just told them that the conversation they had and they will throw him in a well. But Mufassirun actually describe how it happened. They dragged him by the legs. They dragged him up the hill. They took him to the hill. They took him to the well. They were kicking him, they were beating him because he didn't want it. He knew what was happening. His father warned him. He knew what was happening. They beat him, and then they picked him up and they threw him in the well. Jibreel as-salam, there's a narration of Jibreel as-salam, he says, there were 3 times where I rushed from the highest heaven to the earth as fast as I can. And it was so close that I wasn't going to fulfill the command of Allah. The first was when Ibrahim as-salam was being thrown into the fire. I had to go and comfort him. The second was when Ibrahim a.s. was slaughtering his son, and I had to switch his son with a calf. I had to rush down and switch him. And the last time was when Yusuf was thrown in the well, and I had to get there and grab him and gently place him on the water, because the water was very low. It was an abandoned well. If we look at it, the word that was used It was an abandoned well. And what happens with abandoned wells, the water level is very low. So it was a high drop. So he had to come down, grab him, and place him gently. And Mufassirun say that Yusuf a.s. was telling the brothers, you know, if you grow up and you have a family and you have a young son, remember that your brother's in that well. And if you see any other boy playing around or any other little sweet child playing around, remember I am your brother and you threw me in this well. And Jibreel a.s. told them, do not call out for your brothers, Allah will help you today. Allah will help you today. So this was the first hardship he went through, the betrayal of his own blood brothers. The second hardship he went through is the people come and they take him out of this well. Now imagine the happiness he's feeling. That finally I'm coming out. Finally I can reunite with my father. Finally this hardship is going to be over. Someone is saving me. But the moment they take him out of the well, what happens? They put him in the truck, or they put him in the caravan, and they say you're going to be sold as a slave. You're going to be sold as a slave, which is worse than being in a well. He's losing his freedom. So all that hope is destroyed at that moment. Second hardship. Then he gets sold as a slave. He goes into the minister buys him as a slave. He's in the palace and he's serving the people of the palace. And at this time he's feeling some type of, you know, a homey feeling. He's feeling like he's at home. He has some type of family now. He lost his family, now he regained some type of family. The minister loves him, the people love him. He's such a sweet kid and he's serving and he has some type of, you know, the sense of family. But the moment he has that sense and that happiness, he gets thrown into jail. The wife of the minister accuses him and he gets thrown into jail. A small hope he had gets destroyed again. Hardship after hardship after hardship. This is why this story brings comfort. Because no one can go through something like that and still have that level of iman and that belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's very hard. It's very hard. You know, it comes in the Quran, أَحَسِبَ النَّاسُ أَن يَتْرَكُوا أَن يَقُولُوا آمَنَّا وَهُمْ لَا يُفْتَنُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala declares that He declares to the believers, to the Muslims, He says, do you really think that you can believe and say that I am a Muslim, I am a mu'min, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not test you? Every mu'min, every Muslim will be tested. Because Allah tests the ones He loves. And the more He loves you, the more you'll be tested. لا أقسم بهذا البلد وأنت حل بهذا البلد ووالد وما ولد لقد خلقنا الإنسان في كبد. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes three promises. One promise, second promise, third promise, and then He says a statement that holds power. He says that لقد خلقنا الإنسان في كبد, that we have indeed created mankind to be tested, to be put through tests, to be put through hardships. So he's going, and then that was the third one. What's the fourth test he goes through? He's in jail for 7 years. For 7 years he's in jail. He meets two friends. And he does a favor for them. And he tells one of the guys, he says, you'll be leaving this jail. Remember me in front of the king. When you go to the king, remember me. Tell him that I'm innocent. And to review my case, to clear my name. This is the only favor I'm asking you. What happens? وَمَا أَنْسَانِيهُ إِلَّا الشَّيْطَانُ أَنْ أَذْكُرَهُ. The man comes out of jail. The only hope of freedom he had, the man forgot about him. That's his fourth hardship. And the last hardship was losing connection, relationship. You know, having that partner as his young brother, Binyamin. His young brother, he lost him. And people don't think this is a hardship, but he really loved him. And we can tell from the story that when he sees him, the happiness on his face, he loved his young brother. But he didn't have the company of him. That was his fifth hardship. And following these 5 hardships are 5 victories. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you victory for every hardship He makes you go through. What's the first victory? His name is cleared. His name is cleared. He comes out of the jail. What's the second victory? He becomes the king. That same slave becomes the king of the kingdom. What's the third victory? The third victory is he's reunited with that same little brother that he missed so much. Allah reunites it with him. The story of when the brothers walk into the palace and he puts a trinket inside the bag of the little brother and he accuses him of stealing. And he says, you have to make this little brother stay back. And he got to keep his own little brother with him and all the brothers went back home. The fourth victory of Yusuf, what is it? Yeah. He reunites with his own father. Such a beautiful reunion. Mufassirun depict this reunion that he took 70,000 soldiers as an entourage to meet his father outside of the city. How many miles? 72 miles outside the city. Just to meet his father. That's how much love he had for him. You know, if someone meets you at the airport, it's way different than someone who meets you at the house. If someone picks you up from the airport and he meets you at the airport, you know he loves you. You know, because he came all the way and he met you from outside of his home. And then you go home, you meet the rest of the family members. But that person is special. So he wants to make this special entrance for his father. And he greets him, he hugs him, he forgives his brothers. That's his fourth victory. What's the last victory? The most fascinating one. He marries the same woman that accused him. That same woman, Zulaykha, the most beautiful woman in the kingdom, the most desired woman, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives her as a believer to Yusuf, as a wife. What does this teach us? That if you stay away from haram, Allah will give you that which is better than haram. He stayed away from it, and Allah gave him that same woman as a wife. So this story, if we want to remember these 5 hardships and these 5 victories, and keep on reading it. Through any hardship, through any difficulty, it will for sure and guaranteed bring us some type of comfort and love, and it gives us this attachment. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us all the tawfiq to act on what said and convey to those not here. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.